It's 24 June, the year of our Lord, 2022. It is a day of history here on Capitol Hill, the Supreme Court. Let's go to Edie Heipel, who's been helping us with our coverage outside of the Supreme Court. She's with the Star News Network, the great team put together by Michael Patrick Leahy. Edie, we understand they called for a big rally at 5 o'clock. It is so much bigger than when you were out there this morning. And, of course, Jane's Revenge has called for a night of rage starting at 8. Walk us through how the speakers, what size the crowd, and is it getting a little more rambunctious?
Well, as you know, I've been here since this morning and off have seen how the crowd's really changed over time. There's probably at least 1,000 people here right now, and marked shift from earlier. Most of them are on the pro-abortion side and very angry, which is definitely different from earlier this morning when there was a lot of celebration and more on the pro-life side showed up. So DC in general is preparing for what has been called the Night of Rage, put out by groups like Ruth Sent Us and Jane's Revenge. And they're calling for protests starting at 8, and we expect a lot of violence to occur over the next few hours.
Why do you say that? I know that there's been flyers everywhere. They've been on social media. They've been threatening this. But the crowd today, it's been big, but it hasn't been overwhelming. It hasn't been huge. It's nowhere near, I don't know, the 10,000 that showed up after on the day after this was leaked. In this crowd, you've had some pretty heated speakers, but it's been very peaceful. You've been out there since 9 o'clock this morning. It's been relatively peaceful, although rambunctious. Why do you say now you're concerned about violence?
Well, just a lot of signs that are pointing towards that. Obviously, increased police presence. There have been riot police deployed. Businesses are boarding up here. And as we know, Steve, as it turns to nightfall, obviously that's when most of this occurs. And you remember summer of 2020, just like I do, a lot of the violence that occurred during the riots happened at night. So obviously it remains to be seen, and I'd like to be wrong, but we'll stay tuned as the next few hours unfold and see really what happens.
Edie, when we first started with your coverage this morning, the crowd was very pro-life and young. You had high school, college, people in their 20s. It was a very young crowd. It was very celebratory. It's clearly gotten angrier as the day goes on. It was 60-40 or 50-50 pro-life and pro-abortion. What percentage of the crowd, what does it stand right now? And have most of the pro-lifers gone home?
Most of them have, I think. I mean, from what I can see, at least maybe 80% to 90% are on the pro-abortion side. I think most of the pro-lifers have gone home. And, we're also hearing that a lot of these people here today are obviously from around the area in D.C., but a lot are tourists who've decided to stay in the area and delay their trips home to be here to rally and to riot. So that kind of represents who's out here right now.
Edie, you hang on. We're going to go to Boris. We're going to come back to you before the end of the show. That's Edie Heipel. She is part of the Star News Network. Michael Patrick Leahy. She's been out there since 9 o'clock day. Real America's Voice and the Star News Network doing incredible coverage all day. Let me go to Boris. I got Liz Yore. I got Inez, Stepman, Mo Bannon. We're packed today. We're going to have Michael Pack talking about Justice Thomas. Boris, I want to go back to the President Trump of it all. Right. The Liz Yores and these people have worked for decades and decades and decades. The Hobbits, particularly if you're a Catholic, remember people's mothers and sisters and aunts going in front of the abortion centers and praying and saying the rosary. You had these great lawyers that came up in Texas, and you had the great lawyers took the case on in Mississippi. But it took someone to actually stand in the breach and make sure this got delivered. And I want to make sure that all the folks out there, they're talking about this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. Just remember, this is the reason they impeached Trump. This is the reason they impeached him again. This is the reason you have this show trial. This is the reason they tried to nullify the election. You and I were there on the evening of November 8th, early morning the 9th in 2016, when we won the greatest company behind victory ever. And immediately they started the nullification project, right? The Russian hoax, all of it. Right. They knew that Donald Trump was going to do big things that would change the direction of the country. Boris Ephsteyn.
No doubt about it, Steve. It's a great day. It's a historic day. And it's a day that I'm honored to be with you, and I'm definitely honored to have been a small part of the team, of a small team that achieved a historic victory in 2016 under the leadership of President Donald J. Trump. And you're totally right, Steve. There's an absolute fear from the left, the rhinos, the establishment, the media. Just as President Trump said in his statement today, they're afraid of him, and that's why they proliferated and promulgated the Russia hoax. That's why they proliferated and promulgated 2 impeachments and now these Moscow show trials, because President Trump does what he says he will do. Promises made, promises kept. And this promise, this is an issue that, as you said, conservatives have been working on for 50 years and really didn't have much hope, because as we got into the early 2000s and then, the George W. Bush and the Mitt Romney, this was gone. This was an issue that was viewed as not possible to any longer make progress on until President Trump came in and said, I am going to do the right thing. I'm going to not just nominate, but make sure the constitutionalist justices are confirmed to the Supreme Court. And that's what he did. And that's how we got to where we are today. And look at the stark contrast to where we could have been under a crooked Hillary Clinton with Merrick Garland and even more radical, if that's possible, justices of the court than him. This is an absolute victory for life. It's a victory for the most vulnerable among us, the unborn. It's a victory for those of us who treasure the Constitution. And it is undoubtedly a victory for President Donald J. Trump. And any of this chatter, and those people who say, oh, about this guy or that guy, this puts an end to all that. President Trump got done what conservatives couldn't do for 50 years on a national level. That's why that Zaghi poll that came out, just a week or two ago, showing President Trump up by about 40 on the rest of the field in the Republican primary, is actually probably even a little conservative. President Trump, if he were, as we hope and expect, if he were to choose to run in 2024, especially after today, will annihilate the field in the primary and the general and walk into the Oval Office of the latest, January 2025. And this major historic achievement is going to be a big part of that.
No, people don't realize to get these big things done, the focus, not just the justices, but everything, and really reaching out. Remember, he's not a churchy guy, reaching out to the pro-life movement. Yes. There were people in the White House, and I was shocked. They said, I've never been here. I said, well, hold it. Bush was in office for 8 years. They said, no, they would never have us in here. They didn't want to be. That's the Karl Rove of it, right? They don't want to be associated with it. They want the votes. They don't want to be associated. They don't want to bring about any change in policy. Boris, I know you got a punch. What's your social media, and particularly the newsletter that comes out in the morning?
Steve, thank you so much. I want to thank the posse. And today's a day that the posse has to look in the mirror for a few seconds, because we always have to keep working, and give yourself an attaboy. Because this posse was at the root of the historic win of President Donald Trump in 2016. And without that win, we are not at this historic day today. My website is boriscp.com. Hot. Go sign up right now, boriscp.com. Hot on Getter at boriscp. On Twitter at boriscp. Hot on Truth Social at Boris. Hottest on the gram, Boris_Ephsteyn. Stay strong. God bless. And Shabbat Shalom.
1 second before you leave, you brought up something I just want to reiterate. Always here, we got another crisis. You got to do this. You got to man the ramparts. This is a day to sit back tonight and say, hey, we accomplished a massive thing. This is not a small thing. This is a massive thing. This is going to be remembered. This day will be talked about for decades and decades to come. There's so much work to be done here. But remember, big things can get done. The arc of this country can be changed. The arc of people say we're in decline. The bottom's falling out. A lot of truth to that, but it can be stopped and it can be reversed. And this showed you 50 years. You had the Father Frank Pavones. You had the little old ladies doing the rosaries in front of the abortion centers. You had people called the hobbits. You had people knocking on doors. You had people walking precincts to get congressmen to basically take control and to get Trump in office. And I'm telling you, Trump promised and he delivered. He says, I'm going to do it. And he had to fight for those judges. And think how tight it was to get those justices through. So this has been a day to reflect and say, hey, we did this. Yep.
As he said in his statement today, as President Trump said in his statement today, America can still be defended and there's still opportunity to save America. That is what today shows us. And it is a wonderful day for those of us who fought for this for so long. It's definitely a day to take a moment and honor the achievement, to look forward, and to recognize just how much President Donald Trump has changed American history for the better.
Shabbat Shalom. You have a good one. We'll talk to you late tomorrow night. Thank you, brother. Let's go to Liz Yore. We got a killer lineup here. I got Inez Stepman from the Independent Women's Forum. I'll bring in a second. Let me go to Liz Yore. Liz, put it in perspective. We had you on the morning show. You've had Kamala Harris, President Biden, particularly your favorite Catholic. It's hard to me imagine Nancy Pelosi and Liz Yore in the same church, but hey, the Catholic Church is very broad in its membership. You've had Merrick Garland, not saying he'll defend it at all. You fought for this for 50 years, Liz. Tell me what it feels like today. We had Father Pavone on. Give me your perspective as you've gone through the day today.
Steve, yes, this is a moral victory. I think we should all acknowledge the moral courage of the Supreme Court justices. The left wants lawlessness. And I was shocked to hear Merrick Garland say that the DOJ will use every tool at our disposal to overturn this decision. When I took civics, there were 3 equal branches of government. And so when Mad Maxine says that to hell with SCOTUS, we will defy them. The same apply to the legislative branch or the executive branch? I think not. And, Steve, I've been thinking a lot about, 1973, when women were really sold a bill of goods by the feminists, that the baby they were carrying was nothing but a clump of cells. And, the anger that we see in front of the Supreme Court, I'm convinced that many women are, very angry, not knowing they're angry about the fact that these linguistic lies that, of reproductive choice, of reproductive health that was sold to all of them. And there was never any discussion, nor talk about censorship. The pro-life movement was censored for the last 50 years until there was ultrasound. We could not even talk about what was done in abortions, the absolute violence. And so, if there's violence tonight, I want the audience to remember the violence on the street is nothing compared to the violence in the womb. And, there's a certain part of me that says, if your enemy is going to show you how bad they really are, then let them show you. But I think we have some good breaking news of some resources out there for pro-life centers, for churches. The Thomas More Society has written a very tough letter to Ruth, or Jane's Revenge, and Ruth sent us about the possible violations of federal and state law and civil liability that they will incur as a result of disrupting services, religious freedom services, religious churches and masses. So Thomas More has also sent out a notice to all pro-life people that they stand ready to represent them if they are harassed, to churches if there is any vandalism or damage, that they will represent them in filing civil lawsuits against the perpetrators. So I think we're now beginning to see, the National Pro-Life law firm of Thomas More Society has been in this battle for almost 30 years, and they're not going to step away now. So people need to know that there are resources. If the Department of Justice isn't going to step up like it should, there will be law firms, and I know constitutional sheriffs and district attorneys who will help insist on law. The violence and intimidation did not impact the justices in the last 50 days, did it? They didn't, withdraw their decision.
Big.
And so now what are they going to do? That intimidation is going to be pushed onto the streets, I fear, and that violence. And, it's going to be a test for the American people. How much can you take? Think about those justices and their families and what they've endured. We just now learned that Justice Clarence Thomas, they're doxing and sending his home address all over the internet. So, we have to, be strong, be prayerful, be nonviolent, and understand that this moment in history may cost us a bit with some disorder in the streets of our cities. But nevertheless, I think it's important to know that the battle was worth it. And I do have to say one thing about the black abortions. They were inordinately high compared to other ethnic groups. In fact, in the last 50 years, there have been 20 million black babies aborted because Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood targeted poor black areas. And, that is such a genocide, a tragedy, the likes of which, today we need to finally say an end to that. So when I see Mad Maxine come out and, scream about abortion, I think of, 20 million black babies never had a chance to live. And so, we have to have this discussion, and we need to continue this discussion.
Liz, you're going to be with me for the entire hour. Liz Yore, my co-host, has been fighting this for decades and decades and decades. Let me go to Inez Stepman at the Independent Women's Forum. We had Michelle Bachmann on here, Congressman Bachmann on earlier in the previous hour, and she talked about this culture life, that this is all tied to the culture life. You guys just had this huge rally yesterday in Washington, D.C. with, 40 or 50 speakers talking about Title IX and talking about trying to keep that for women's sports. Put it in perspective, yesterday and today, what's happened from your perspective?
Well, I'm really glad you're covering this because, unfortunately, as we know, there are plenty of wins for the left, even as the right claims a great victory here with the end of Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has issued, finally, regulations that they have been hinting at for quite some time, but they've finally dropped them. And those regulations, by bureaucratic fiat, right, not through the elected representatives, they redefine sex in civil rights law in a way that's going to force every school that takes a dime of federal money, that's almost all public, obviously all public schools from K all the way up to graduate school, and then nearly every university excepting, schools like Hillsdale, they all have to pretend not to be able to recognize the biological differences between men and women. And that means men can participate in all women's activities, whether that's, the locker room or the track.
Inez, I want you to explain to our audience the administrative state, because this is what we're up against right now. You talk about laws and going to the courts, and you're going to see this. I mean, Merrick Garland and Biden just came out about the abortion situation and said, hey, we're going to be putting out executive orders. We're going to fight this tooth and nail. The Supreme Court just ruled on it. What you just described is the administrative state. You're seeing it here in this Title IX situation. Just describe to our audience, when we talk about the administrative state, it's much deeper than when people think bureaucrats. It's actually a system unto itself. Can you explain to our audience the fight we're up against?
Right. I mean, I think most people, and perhaps less so after these last 4 years under Donald Trump, because we saw the way in which the administrative state basically went to work countering the president's policy in a very public way. But the reality is that the president doesn't control the executive branch, right? These agencies have become so powerful. The people who staff them remain permanently in power, regardless if Republicans or Democrats are elected. And they have been carving out more and more power for themselves. So, for example, redefining sex, right? This is something actually that through the legislative process, there was an attempt to do that. It's called the Equality Act. And it failed because it couldn't garner enough votes from the people's representatives to pass. And yet here is essentially bureaucrats who are unelected, basically passing more or less the same thing, at least with regard to educational institutions, and not needing to go to the people, right? And so this is a huge constitutional problem, just generally the administrative state, deep state, whatever you want to call it. But it's also a very stark political problem, right? There's a reason that we talk about Republican administrations landing teams, right? Like we're landing on Omaha Beach. And it's because every policy that you try to implement in a Republican administration, and particularly an outsider administration like Trump's, where everybody is going to disagree with you in the bureaucratic class, you're talking about 95% of the donations in 2016 that came from federal government employees went to Hillary Clinton. 95%. So you're implementing what is attempting to implement policies through people who despise you, despise your ideas, despise the policies you're trying to push forward. So this is a real problem for constitutional democracy. If we elect people and then they cannot implement the policies that they want to implement because unelected people who nobody decided to hand this power to actually can, in many cases, stymie and stop those things from happening.
I just want to have you reiterate, because I don't think a lot of people, it hasn't gotten to the news, what Biden put forward. I think it's about the school lunch program and about this gender ideology, because this gender ideology seems to have taken over everything. Just walk back through again what they have actually promulgated that they're going to enforce.
Yeah, so there are multiple agencies issuing this. So what you're referencing is this is the school lunch program. So they're saying that they're going to take dollars among the many dollars that the feds send to schools is this school lunch program. So in keeping with the regulations that the Department of Education is now issuing, we have other departments saying we are going to pull your funding if you don't pretend that men and women are interchangeable, that boys can be girls if they claim it so. And by the way, this Title IX regulation, that's only one part of it. There are two other huge parts of it. So one is completely redefining sex, which is monumental in itself. The others are stripping the regulations and the rights that were assured by the Trump administration on the questions of due process and free speech, right? So we all saw the Kavanaugh, mere accusation standard. Well, that's been the standard. That was the standard under the Obama administration for universities. So if you were accused of sexual misconduct, you had very little recourse, a very unfair process. In fact, a process that has been struck down in federal courts nearly 200 times since in various cases where the students actually went back and sued the school and said, you violated my due process in declaring me, for example, like a sexual rapist, right? Without any due process. So that's all coming back. To the Trump administration's credit, they actually did a really good job of putting this down on regulation. So otherwise, this would have happened by dear colleague letter. Meaning just a letter that goes out. We wouldn't even had to have waited these 2 years. It took them almost 2 years because the Trump administration did a good job on due process and free speech. But yeah, these regulations are monumental. They cut into fundamental constitutional rights and they redefine sex. So this is, I think this, there's a couple exceptions, maybe the vaccine mandate, but I think this might be the most sort of sweeping and wildly transformative regulation ever issued by an agency.
Inez, how can people find out more about the Independent Women's Forum?
You can go to IWF.org, which has all of our work of myself and all of our colleagues here at IWF.
And what's your social media so people can follow you?
Sure, you can find me. It's at Inez Felcher, but you can put in Inez Stepman.
Inez, thank you very much. Honored to have you on here today.
Thank you so much.
Liz, I want to go back off Inez. The administration, Merrick Garland, Biden, and Kamala Harris came out immediately and said, we don't care what the Supreme Court said. By administrative fiat, we're going to fight this tooth and nail. Not just at the state level where they're supposed to go back. But that's why I wanted Inez on. By administrative fiat, they're going to take us on every day. What do you anticipate as one of the warriors at the tip of the spear for the right to life movement? What can we anticipate of Merrick Garland and the Biden administration, or I should say the Biden regime?
The Biden regime, yeah, they're going to pass regulations with respect to abortion type federal funds with respect to abortion, continue to push abortion on schools. And it's so they will figure out a workaround a Supreme Court decision, which clearly says that there is no federal right to abortion. So we really, Steve, how often have we learned that we need to be attentive to all the, in the weeds regulations, how they are going to continue to whittle away. And I was struck when Inez was talking. Just as they had us deny that is a human being in the womb, we're now being forced to deny sex, biology. Everybody has either an XX or XY chromosome in every single cell in our body, despite any kind of surgery. And yet everything is being turned on its head. And who is the one who always gets hurt? It's always the children. And, so the administration that is not able to ensure formula on the shelves for babies is now going to deprive children of school, poor children of school lunches in schools where their parents don't want this kind of radical propaganda, gender ideology forced down their throat. So that's what the Democrats think about poor people, about children, about education. They're using these institutions as propaganda machines to force this bizarre thinking. And now it's coming at all, to us everywhere. Drag queen shows at libraries and schools.
Yes.
I mean, everybody's head spinning. I mean, parents have just finished 2 years of battling the masks and COVID, and now they're facing drag queens and SEL. And, let's continue to talk about the fact that this ideology caused 2 little girls to be raped in, gender neutral bathrooms in Loudoun County. I mean, the facts are on our
Liz,
side.
Hang on for 1 second. Liz, Yore's my co-host. Captain Bannon's my co-host. We've got Royce White, Michael packed all next. We're going to take a short commercial break. We'll return in a moment at War Room Battleground on a historic day, the 24th of June, Friday, the 24th of June, the year of our Lord 2022, one that will go down in history. Roe v. Wade is dead. Back in a moment.
Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back. Liz Yore talked about in the previous section that Margaret Sanger targeted the black community specifically with her Planned Parenthood operation. And 20 million plus. I mean, I've heard the number 30, 35, 40. I want to bring in Royce White. Royce White put up on Getter today, Roe v. Wade overturned. Praise be to the Most High. Royce White is running for I think, Minnesota 5, the congressional district. Royce, what does this day mean to you and to, I think, the African-American community in the United States, black Americans, about the end of Roe v. Wade, sir?
Victory and a long spiritual war that began early on with people like Margaret Sanger who were open about their enthusiastic eugenics beliefs. And we have lost 20 to 30 million black babies, black souls since 1973. And all of those children had an opportunity to make more children. So who knows what the number actually is? What I can say is that you can't have human rights or civil rights without the sanctity.
Royce, we're going to have you hopefully on back tomorrow and Monday for a deeper conversation of this. But the question is in a D plus, 20 district, is the right to life a topic that you believe, you're staking your political career on it, do you believe that that's a topic that African Americans in that district will rally to your side and say, you know what, you're absolutely correct? Because I got to tell you, on MSNBC and CNN, they're saying that Black America is 99% against this. And you got Maxine Waters out there and all these other types of saying this is, so where do you think it stands politically for you on this crusade of yours?
Well, I'm not sure, but what I can say is that I think it's completely absurd that in America, for any woman, but especially for black women, that their sole political power has been anchored on the right to kill their own children. I think that's completely abhorrent, and I think it's a message that we can surely get across to black women. Hopefully, that if we love black people, if we love ourselves, then we have to protect black children. We have to protect the citizenship of black children in the womb, obviously, if necessary. I'm happy with the Supreme Court decision. It's the single greatest thing my government has done in my lifetime. And I think it's a message going forward that can start to repair and rebuild the black community. And as an aside, make no mistake about it, black on black crime, the loss of sanctity of life and black on black crime is correlated to us killing our children in the womb. I mean, sanctity of life is a broad spectrum cultural issue in the black community, and we're going in the right direction now.
Real quickly, what kind of blowback did you get when you put that out today? That was one of the most powerful statements I thought on this entire day of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. What did you get, more positive support or was it more negative?
I'm not quite sure how this info war even got out of hand in this way. I got nothing but positive feedback. Maybe I'm just running in the right circles, but people seem to be open to the idea, at least in my audience, that a child's life is is a child's life, and to create some arbitrary standard of what a life is just not something that's going to hold up in a logical sense with adults and with grown honest people. And the numbers speak. Black people should have another 30 to 40 million American citizens in our nation today, and we don't. And it is the product and result of a culture war that was driven by the same people on the same side of the political aisle that say that they deserve the black vote almost in blind faith today.
Royce, early voting started. How do people get to your campaign? How do they find out more about you? How do they find you on social media?
RoyceWhite.us. That's our campaign website. Early voting has begun in our primary. I am in a dogfight against the uniparty globalist rhino who at one point said abortion were red meat politics for the Republican base. And that's the fight we're in against the uniparty in this country. I'm happy to be representing the America First platform. Please go to your local city hall in Minnesota CD5 and cast your early vote ballot.
Royce White, honored to have you on here today, sir, on such an important historical day.
Godspeed, brother.
I want to let me get Liz Yore back in here for a second before I go to Ernie Preate, who has argued these cases 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Liz, what Royce just said right there, the beginning of the scourge of black on black crime started with this decision on Roe v. Wade. And it's what Michelle Bachmann said. It said, America's culture coarsened. Something happened in America in 1973 that spread throughout the culture. You just saw Royce White saying, hey, into the black community, it spread like wildfire. What say you, ma'am?
Yeah, I mean, that's the discussion we haven't had, is it? You know, we didn't want to talk about that. We weren't allowed to talk about it. But it's clearly the fact of the matter, the destruction of the black community, the violence in the black community, with just outside the black community is always a Planned Parenthood facility killing black babies. And, you know, really in many respects, you know, destroying a whole generation of souls who, you know, could restore peace, happiness into the black community. And, you know, the Democrats have been, you know, as far as I'm concerned, slave owners when it comes to abortion and the black community. And it's time to pull them out. And we're a great, generous society that will support parents in crisis pregnancies. And the time is now. And the time is to have, you know, like Royce is saying, that conversation in campaigns, you know, with the community. And, you know, it's the Democrats have been pushing abortion on the black community for 50 years. And so the other thing,
Liz, hang on 1 second. I want to bring Michael Pack into this conversation. The great filmmaker just made this incredible film on Created Equal about Justice Thomas. Michael, you saw the opinions today. You saw Justice Thomas. It's the lead story in Daily Mail. He actually thinks things are go farther. Put it in perspective today. What does today mean for Justice Clarence Thomas?
I think some people say it's the Thomas Court, and it looks more and more like that. He is really the dominant intellectual force, at least the way I see it. You know, after writing dissents for many years, he's now in majority. He is the intellectual leader, even though Sam Alito, who is also, I know him, and he is a great man too, but I think Justice Thomas is the intellectual leader of this court. And I think today was a great victory for the Constitution. You know, he's returned the abortion question to the states and the people where it belongs.
Also, when you say the Thomas Court, he actually, part of his writings here actually gave a broader thing of other things to come, or at least areas of inquiry. Talk to us about that, because I think you're right. I think Justice Thomas, this was so powerful in your film because you let him speak right into the camera. He is the intellectual leader of this court, the driving force. You have heavyweights like Gorsuch, like Alito, right? But clearly, this is where he's the driving force in this. Talk to us about this kind of broader interpretation of these aspects of the Constitution.
Well, I think you're right. It comes out of his life, his commitment to the Constitution. And I think if your viewers want to watch our film and read our book, they could see how his commitment to the Constitution comes directly out of his life experiences. And it's pretty clear in his concurrence to the Dobbs decision. He wants to consider further the constitutionality or the constitutional basis of previous decisions. He's totally against substantive due process, which he considers, and it makes sense, an abuse of this term in the 14th Amendment. He calls it an oxymoron, and it's right. I mean, the term is supposed to say you're supposed to get due process. But then the court has used it to create substantive new rights, not to just give you process. And as he points out, how can something be both substantive and process-oriented? And he wants to consider other cases and consider their constitutional basis. That does not mean he's made up his mind about that, and it does not mean he has an opinion on whether the underlying issues are good or bad. I mean, that's the key thing. It's a question of what the Constitution says and how it says it. It's not a question of the merits of the underlying issue, be it abortion, be it gay marriage, be it gun rights.
The story of this man's life is the American story. It's the hero's journey. It's a uniquely American story. I want to make sure our audience knows, particularly this weekend, how to get to your film, right? And then what I loved about it that you took, because I worked with you before, Michael, you shot 30 hours or 25, you cut it down to a couple. You've got to leave a lot on the cutting room floor. Mark came, who has a long-term history with
Right.
justice, and actually said, let's put it into a book that 95% new material is not in there. So I want people, particularly this weekend, how do they get to the streaming version of your film, and how they then buy the book?
This would be a good weekend to look at those things. So the film is streaming on many sites. It's on Amazon. It's on a lot of conservative sites. If you go to our website, manifoldproductions.com, you can get a full list of where it's streaming. And the book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, wherever you get books. So they're both easy to get, and they're both they both tell a very moving story of Justice Thomas. And I encourage listeners to look at both.
So our viewers and listeners, the podcast, radio, TV, all of it, here's what we need to do this weekend. I tell you why. This show trial that's taking place, the first person they're targeting is Donald J. Trump. The second person they're targeting is Justice Clarence Thomas. Okay? They understand the intellectual firepower, and it is the Thomas Court, and they're going to try to move heaven and earth to stop that. And that's why now you need to hear this man's story, and most importantly, hear the way he thinks. That's what makes the film so powerful, Michael. Michael, once again, how do people, your social media, how do they get to you?
They can get to me at Michael Pack _. But I wanted to say, taking up your point, just as Thomas says in the film and in the book, that he was a victim, and people on the left thought, oh, that's great. But he said, we're going to tar and feather this guy we don't like. But as he says, there's plenty of tar and plenty of feather, and you will be the next one in the Tower of London if you knock down all the laws. And we've seen that to be the case. There's politics of personal destruction. This effort to destroy someone has gone on unchecked, and since 1991 in his confirmation hearing. And you and I, Steve, have also been under this kind of attack too, and it's simply ceaseless.
So we are. Michael Pack, you're a hero and a mentor. Fabulous film. Your timing, brother, is exquisite, right? I know when you make a film, it's just exquisite. So thank you very much, and such great work for the country to get the story out. The hero's journey of the created equal with Michael Pack's film. We'll make sure I get up on all the platforms so people see it, and the book. Let me go to Ernie Preate now. Ernie, Justice Thomas came on the scene just about the time you were arguing these cases in court. Talk to us about what today feels like for somebody like yourself that have been in the vineyard on the legal side for decades and decades and decades.
It started, Steve, and thank you for having me on. We talked about this about a year ago, and I think when the case was first up in the court, and I said it was going to be a 5-4-6-3 decision, and turned out to be pretty correct on that. But the fact of the matter is, we have been fighting to overturn Roe for 40 years, not just Pennsylvania, but Ohio and other states. And finally, in Pennsylvania, in the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case in 1992, it came to fruition. And so we argued straightforward, right to the court, that Roe versus Wade was unconstitutional. It was on flimsy legal grounds and should be overturned. We also argued alternatively that Roe, if it was constitutional, didn't put an undue burden on the alleged right, and it created a new standard, which is the viability standard, which is what Dobbs is all about today. So there's the lineage right there. Goes from our actions back in 1990s to today, where Roe's overturned. We wanted Roe overturned. We wanted a viability standard, and Chief Justice Roberts went for it. He actually, in his concurring opinion, said he believed that this was that Casey was right, that was that viability standard was the one to use. But historically, let's look at this. The United States of America didn't declare there was a right to abortion until 1973. There was no right prior to that. It was never written in the Constitution. It was never written in regulations. It was created out of whole cloth, on a patchwork of references to cases and treaties and surveys and that sort of thing. So there's really no legal basis, and that's what Justice Alito said today in the opinion. The point being that abortion is not outlawed. It still can be done, but has to be done by state legislatures now. All the court's saying is it's not in the Constitution. If you want it, you got a state legislature, have and a governor that wants it, go do it that way. And New York has done it, California's done it, Virginia's done it. There's almost a dozen states that have already enacted abortion laws, the permissive abortion laws. So in addition to that, it did not allow, and let's make this clear, it didn't outlaw contraception, as the president was suggesting today, or just outrageously stupid. That it was going to have an effect on same-sex marriages. I don't think it will. Alito said that specifically, joined in by 6 justices, joined in by 5 other justices. It is not. I know that Justice Thomas raised the issue, but he didn't say, "Oh, I'm going to vote to outlaw same-sex marriages. I'm going to outlaw contraception." He didn't say that. He just said, "Let's look at the legal underpinning." Yeah.
The constitutional underpinning. Ernie, a great day of celebration. We got to bounce, but I got to tell you, for those of you in the Casey situation, and for 30 and 40 years, a hat tip. People don't realize how many years laboring in the vineyard that the legal teams did here. So thank you very much. I don't know if you're 80-some years old, Ernie. Do you have social media?
I'm 81 and a half, and I'm still doing my Marine Corps push-ups.
I know you are. See,
but it's through my daughter Alexandra, who kind of works for you on occasion.
On occasion, she's our comms person.
Yes, she is.
Ernie, thank you so much. Congratulations today, Ernie. Thank you so much. Want to go back briefly to Liz Yore. Liz, what's the irony of having this being the Thomas Court, Clarence Thomas being the lead intellectual on this, even with Alito, and the fact that, I don't know, 20 or 30 million black babies were killed in this genocide? Liz Yore.
Well, there are no coincidences, are there? And I would urge every parent, not just black parents, to watch the movie, Michael Pack's movie, read Clarence Thomas's book about his grandfather. The story of his life is the most inspiring story. We've got to stop talking about violence and get these young black boys reading about the heroes, especially that hero on the Supreme Court, who was, the politics of self-destruction. I saw it. We all saw it. That's where it really, they sharpened their tools on Clarence Thomas. But he fought back, and he's now, a shining star in the court. So it's a great day for him.
Liz, how do people get to you? What's your social media? Because I know you're going to have a lot to say tonight, particularly as violence comes out. You've got the Thomas More letter up. Where's your social media handles?
I'm everywhere under Elizabeth Yore. I'm going to post contact information for people who need to get to Thomas More Society, pro-life advocates, churches, pregnancy centers. I'll put that on all my, Twitter, as well as Getter, and my website's yourchildren.com.
Okay. We're going to track you down tomorrow after tonight. Mo Bannon, I realize you don't have time. What's your social media? You're going to be putting up stuff on Getter all night and on Instagram as we monitor throughout the night. We'll have you back on tomorrow morning. Mo, what is your social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Getter at Maureen_Bannon, and also at Instagram at Real Maureen Bannon.
You're going to be putting stuff for us all night, so I'll deal. You and I will work together as soon as we're off of this. I want to go to Edie Heipel one last time. Edie, put us outside the Supreme Court. Tell us, is it getting any more? Is it getting any rougher out there, ma'am?
It's about the same. I mean, there's speech is still going on, and we just received word that there's amped up calls for protesting outside of the Justice Thomas's house tonight. So that's going to be a situation that we'll have to monitor as time goes on. But you know what, Steve, there's not just pro-choice people here. There are also pro-life people. I just spoke with a woman who actually survived an abortion as a baby. She was discarded into the trash, and she survived that situation, and that's why she's here today. And I just can't help but think that's truly what today represents. It's such a historic day, not just for pro-life Americans, but really all Americans who perhaps might not even know of the freedom and joy that embracing life comes with. And so I just hope that today and as the rest of the weeks unfold here, that this prompts about a time of healing in our nation.
Edie, what is your social media? I want people to be able to follow you tonight, man. You've done a great job.
Thank you. I'm on Twitter at Edie M. Heipel, and I've been reporting for Star News Network at Star News Net.
I want everybody to follow Edie. Edie, you be very safe tonight. It's going to get dangerous out there. They're already sending out social media about Justice Thomas's home. I want everybody to go on Manafort, Amazon, get the book, get the movie, find out about Clarence Thomas. You need to know more about him. Captain Bannon, Liz Yore, thank you so much. We're going to be back here tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Captain Bannon and myself are going to try to get Mike Davis, Liz Yore, all of it as we monitor the night of rage. We'll be back here in the War Room tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.